Well, it's a good evening from the studios in Brisbane, and I just want to let everybody know that our good friend Andrena won't be here tonight. She's, you wouldn't believe it, she's got this fantastic offer to head off out of the UK to go to a place in Ireland called Newgrange. Oh, where is it? Just missed it there. Where is it? Newgrange, and there's a little place there. It's pretty impressive little place, sort of deal with all the ancient monuments. Anyway, so that's just to let everybody know where she is. But in the meantime, we're back in Australia, and our guest tonight we've actually had back in 2001, I think, 2002. None other, all the way from Victoria, by the way. And for those people who don't know where Victoria is, let's go and have a look. Up today. Where are we, mate? Dun, dun, dun. There you go. So there's Victoria down there in the red dot, and we're going all the way down to Mornington Peninsula, and that's where Gerard is tonight. So without further ado, I've met Gerard several times, and they've all been at the Body Health and Harmony festivals, naturally in Brisbane. And of course, Gerard comes from Melbourne, so he travels all the way around Australia just to let everybody know about his core subject, his passion. So without further ado, I'll bring on Gerard, and he can bring us up to speed.
Thanks, Jeff. How's it all going? Yep. So there's some really interesting things happening these days. Have developments over the last probably 5 years, radiation-wise, and there's two really big things, which is the vac shedding, which is a radiation issue. It's an electromagnetic imprinting from one person to another. The other thing I'll talk about is the what some people would call 5G streetlights, but they're actually not 5G streetlights yet. I call them radiating streetlights. And these are a real concern radiation-wise because they generate a type of radiation called a ground current that's going through everyone's houses. It started in 2019 in choice suburbs in Sydney, Canberra, Adelaide, Brisbane, and Perth, but not Melbourne or Darwin or Hobart. And in 2023, there was around between January 23 till May 23, there was a mass turn on of these streetlights all over Australia, but it's also all over the whole world. It's just been a very, very big thing.
So you're talking about those streetlights that we see that have got a little blue or a little dome on top of them. Is that the ones?
No, they actually, yes and no. The blue dome, I think, is a sensor that senses the daylight, so it knows when to turn on and turn off. Well, supposedly the LED streetlights that all the councils have been changing over. And in those streetlights is a small antenna, a phased array antenna, or there's other names for it. And those antennas are radiating, they're operating at the moment. Prior to, say, in Melbourne, April 2023, or leading up to that, a lot of these streetlights were installed, but the antennas were not radiating. After April, May 2023, they were radiating. Some people around the world are calling them 5G streetlights, and we in the beginning called them 5G streetlights because if you look at the 5G story in the very beginning, so going back to 2016 when they first announced it and what they call a millimetre wave, they said that with the millimetre wave, because it doesn't travel very far, that you're going to need antennas on every building, on street poles, street lights, within buildings if they're large buildings, and then they realised that the permissions needed by the building owners and then the infrastructure required to do it was just way over the top and virtually impossible. So what people don't know is that was quietly dropped, and newer technology for the 5G on the towers was brought in. So go back to 2019, Optus on their website published similar. Yeah, that's a brand that we don't see in Australia. We see another type of brand, but similar type of thing. But anyway, Optus in 2019 advertised on their website expression of interest for 5G home broadband. And the suburbs that they nominated were only in those capital cities I mentioned before. And because I've been watching what was going on with 5G in Australia, because before we said anything on our website about 5G, we wanted something that was researched by ourselves, go on and experienced by itself, to factual as possible, not something dragged off the internet from someone else that is complete garbage. And I know one of our competitors did that, and they got a knock on the door by the ACCC for doing that. And I think it might have been the TGA, because it was just total garbage and fear-mongering too. I don't like to do that. So I worked out that one of those suburbs, for example, was a suburb in Canberra called Dixon. And how I worked out that it was listed on the Optus website. Two, with my ability, and this is something I do on a daily basis for people all over the world, I read their properties remotely. I read the energy of their properties, the electromagnetics, using Google Earth. It's not a hard thing to do. I've been doing it for a long time. And I've been looking at this suburb called Dixon, and it had established that there was a thing called the geoelectric ground current, which is synonymous with a radiating streetlight or a mobile phone tower. And it covered the whole suburb of Dixon, and that got us intrigued. So we flew to Dixon, and when we got there, there were these brand newly installed LED streetlights and other equipment on virtually every street. Every lamp had been changed over, basically. And there was ground current. We did our testing, and we did testing with a kinesiologist, an independent one, which we took along with us, because you always do radiation testing on a real human being, not a foam dummy called Sam. So we did our testing, saw the streetlights, came back to Melbourne, published our videos, wrote blogs about it, blah, blah, blah. And then we noticed that our local Peninsula Council had been changing over their sodium globe lights for the same LED lights. And we thought, okay, they're going to turn them on down here, but nothing happened whatsoever. But back to Canberra, what we thought they was 5G streetlights, because of what we were told in 2019, what the internet said, because they said it would go into streetlights. We assumed they were 5G streetlights, but back then we didn't have 5G phones, so it was just going along with what the narrative was saying. Come forward to, let's say, Melbourne, 2023, April, May, they turned them on throughout Melbourne. And this is worldwide too, although some countries like the UK had their streetlights radiating in certain suburbs back as far as 2018, I think. Come back to 2023, May, they turned them on. How I know they turned them on, you can feel the radiation, because a geoelectric ground current going through someone's house is the second most dangerous form of radiation around. Most dangerous being, unfortunately I have to say this, someone that's taken the COVID vaccine. That's not a slur against them, because a lot of people had to take that. They were forced to do it to keep their jobs, like two of my children, for example. But anyway, the geoelectric ground current radiation from these streetlights is phenomenal. In my consultancy work, prior to the streetlights being turned on, if you had a house that had, or a property that had geoelectric ground current, it would be due to a death on a property, because that will do the same thing. And the reason I was called there was that the radiation charge was making someone sick in the house, or keeping someone from recovering from various types of illnesses and things that go on. And so, this radiation is going through everyone's properties. And if they didn't have it beforehand, because generally residential houses don't have ground current, although unit developments do and high-rise buildings do. That's due to power supply issues and things like that. It's not a normal thing, and it's been radiating. And okay, the assumption was 5G, but it's now almost April. Let's call it, mid-March 2025, and that was back in May 2023. and there's still no 5G connection. And you can test, anyone can test this themselves. Like, for example, in Melbourne, where I live on the peninsula, we've got Nepean Highway, it runs down the peninsula. So if you start in Frankston, there's 5G tower on top of a large building in Frankston. Then a couple of k's down the road, you've got one, two in Mount Eliza, another two in Mornington. And so as you drive down the freeway, if you watch your phone, or like on my dash in my car, my phone connectivity comes up, you'll get 5G close to the towers, but as you're driving along, it drops off down to 4G, then back up to 5G, then to 4G. So it's doing this as you go down, 5 or 6 k's down the road. And all the way along there are LED streetlights with antennas in them. And if there was a 5G connection, you'd have 5G full bars as you go all the way from end to end down the Nepean Highway. And I've done this experiment in all sorts of places as I drive around, to and from consultancy jobs around Melbourne. And so that's an interesting thing, that these streetlights are radiating, is causing a severe amount of radiation, and no one's saying anything about it. The telcos aren't saying anything about it. The local councils are saying nothing about it. The the state government said nothing. The federal government said nothing. PANZA said nothing. It's just complete silence about the whole thing. I had a local person reach out to our Peninsula Council about it, and their environmental bloke was very concerned about what she had to say, and he went back and did research and came back and said, to our knowledge, we have no knowledge of these radiating streetlights and what's going on. It's like beyond, above them. Whether he was telling a porky, I don't know, but it seemed quite genuine. The other really interesting thing about streetlights is that the LEDs were replacing either the orange sodium globe lights or the fluoros that they put up through Melbourne many, many years ago. A fluorescent light at night time is a radiation issue, but it's nothing like a radiating street light, so to speak. But the fluorescent lights that went up are the sodium globes that went up a long time ago. Guess what? They're radiating too, the same as the new LEDs. And that's really, really interesting. I have a friend who works for a particular manufacturer in Sydney that produces 5G antenna technology, and I asked him about the streetlights, and they know absolutely nothing about it. And they're at the top of the chain as far as the development of technology and different types of antennas and things like that. So it's a really interesting one. The timing of it is a little bit suspicious if you really want to go way out there. Another cause of geoelectric ground current radiation used to be from when we had high solar winds, like solar wind speeds from sunspots coming from the sun that would be, say, over 450 kilometres an hour and above that, or when we had Mercury in retrograde. Then we used to get a worldwide geoelectric ground current. And it was actually 3 to 4 times worse than what we get with the radiating streetlights. And to quantify that, the radiating streetlights will create a radiation charge coming out of the ground, going through everyone's properties to about 2 metres above the ground. Whereas a solar wind speed of, say, 550, 600 kilometres per second, which is quite high, would, one, cause auroras worldwide. 2, it would generate a geoelectric ground current that would emanate to, say, 6 to 8 metres above the ground. So if you would put it in that type of perspective. But in March, 1st of March 2023, no matter what wind speeds we were getting from the sun, the geoelectric ground current stopped. And some people would put that down to the age of Aquarius. So, for example, back in January, February 2023, because we're entering into the top of solar cycle 25, which is the top of that cycle in 2025, the astrologers were saying, the energies now are really bad. And that was according to the astrological calculations and things like that. But they said in March, it's going to be really, really good. I'm saying, well, what's going to happen? They're going, we don't know, but it's going to be really, really good. And a few of them would say, age of Aquarius. And I was like, okay, whatever. And I used to say, what are the key performance indicators? And they couldn't tell you anything. But the key performance indicator of that, if it was connected to the beginning of the Aquarian age, as I was saying, the key performance factor was no more geoelectric ground current, which is from solar winds, which is really interesting. But however, from January, depending on where you were in Australia, to May, the street lights were all turned on en masse, not just Australia-wide, but worldwide. So there's a really weird conspiracy theory that, okay, they knew this was coming. They knew that the Aquarian event was coming. They knew that the ground current would stop. And if the ground current would stop, it would take the electromagnetic stress of people, which is an allowing of consciousness, if you want to connect it through there. And, not trying to be too much of a conspiracy theorist, but it's plainly, obviously, that they don't want us to consciously evolve in any way possible, because they don't want us to wake up to what's going on. Too late now anyway. But that's just a way out theory that they turn the streetlights on to recreate the ground current from something which was always occurring on and off, depending on what was going on, to not occurring whatsoever anymore. Very interesting.
Just come back. So the councils, are they ones who are purchasing the equipment, or are they?
They're purchasing the equipment. That's true, and that's where this was only put up to one person in one council. I'm not an activist. I don't go knocking on doors and beating my chest and going this or that. I've got work to do. I've got a company to run, and I've got a lot of hungry customers worldwide who need information on what harmonizes and solutions to some of their energetic problems too.
So just come back here. So I met a lady here. She works for a local government organisation. So all the councils in Queensland, they go to them to go to all the contractors and suppliers of product. So generally speaking, I know that when this is me speaking personally, when I'll just flick across here. My power bill was in the order of around about $980 every 3 months. Yeah.
Yep.
And I ended up saying, do I go solar? And I thought, no, I was just going to check out these LEDs. And so I got an electrician to come in, and he changed 66 light fittings, light bulbs into LEDs. And my power bill went down to $290 to $330 every 3 months.
Yeah, that's true, because the people who are the Peninsula Council on their website back in 2019, when we thought that they were actually going to these streetlights be radiating, did have on their website that the reason for changing over was saving greenhouse gas, because they're all a bunch of greenies, and also to save on money too. So they are what they say cheaper to run. But it's not the lights, it's the antenna that's doing all the...
Oh, yeah. So in my case, it cost me $3,200. Yep. But the way I looked at it, I was going to get my money back within 3 years, as opposed to putting a solar power station on my roof, which had a life expectancy of probably 3 years before I had to go and get a new inverter. Yeah.
Yep.
But I also was given a heads up. The reason why the government was pushing solar on houses was purely because here in Queensland, I'm going to give the Queensland side of the story, is that we had an electrical trades union dispute, and it went on for weeks and weeks. And I mean, there was a time in there in the early 80s that we had to get home to actually listen to find out what suburbs or what parts of Queensland were going to be put on a power shedding cycle. And so the Premier of the time, Jockey Peterson, said, enough's enough. He sacked the whole electrical trades union. So they were all gone. And so 25 years later, this guy knocks on my door for the radio station to give me a story. And the story was, in 25 years, there haven't been any personnel climbing those big high transmission towers to clean the insulators. And so the power, all the dirt and all that stuff had built up on the insulators, was reducing the amount of electricity coming from the actual power stations, that's the coal power stations, into the metro cities, which is where the power was required. And so instead of going and laying out new cables and new high transmission cables and finding staff who could actually climb a bloody transmission tower who wasn't scared, frightened, the only reason I'm saying that is that a guy on our football team, he was 18 at the time, and he applied for a job, and the guy said, "Can you climb that tower?" And he climbed the tower. I said, "Mate, you got the job." He said, "Well, what have I got to do?" He said, "No, we'll train you. We just want to know you had any fear of heights." And that's the key to their business. So as a consequence, if you move along the train line, there was no one about to actually climb there and clean those insulators. And so they decided that, oh, okay, the best thing is to put the retail customer who put a solar farm on their roof, and they could put power back into the grid. And of course, when we had a cyclone Yazi, or cyclone, one of the cyclones up north, and it wiped out all the power lines going through the suburb of Mackay, two electrical workers up there repairing it, they got electrocuted. And the reason they got electrocuted, even though they got and shut off the grid in their local area, but they forgot about houses that had the solar farms on their roof, sending electricity back into the grid. And so hence the reason they went and put smart meters in there so they could send a signal down and shut those solar farms on the roofs to come back into the grid. And so that was in the Queensland scenario what happened here. So why the initiative was to get people to put solar on their home and get a rebate, which was cheaper than actually building new power stations or building new transmission cables.
Interesting. Well, I believe, I don't know if it's true or not because I'm not an electrician, but Queensland government this summer gone and last summer were turning people's reverse cycle air conditioning off via their smart meters. I don't know whether it's possible or not, but there was a lot of stuff that like that seemed to go on.
Well, in New Zealand, back in the 60s and 70s and 80s, it was common knowledge that you had a hot water system. And of course, probably in Victoria, you would have your hot water system inside the house, and you had a cupboard there where you had shelves in it, and you could put all your woolens in there to get dried out because of the heat. Yeah. Well, in Queensland, you have them on the outside of the house. You don't have them on the inside. You have those on the outside of the house. Where was it going with that? Oh, yeah. So in New Zealand, when there was a drain on the grid, the local city councils energy, they could send a signal through and then shut down all these shut down all the hot water systems.
Oof, interesting.
Yeah, that was in the 60s and the 70s. So they always had that technology. Yeah. And it's the same technology they could send through to traffic lights. So the local ambulance station here, they can just hit a switch and it just stops the local traffic light system so they can come out of their fire station. They can control it. So it's just a matter of sending a signal down in it. So anyway, that's LEDs. But you're now talking about LEDs in the streets where the council's been told, well, you're going to save money. In my case here, I saved over $600 every quarter. So if the council's going to save that type of money, oh, that's fantastic. So now the next question is, to have 5G, well, over Japan and Korea, they're actually working together to create 6G. They've been working on that for the last
years. It's actually a worldwide collaboration. And they have a meeting somewhere around the world, and everyone gets together. This is what I've been told. And they decide on certain frequencies for the 6G, and they're talking about that coming up soon.
Yeah, but I mean,
that technology has been developed by Australian companies and other countries all over the world.
But like we're talking on radio, we're going live on radio, obviously on FM 88. That's the frequency, but we're going simulcast here on YouTube and Facebook and X and later on. So, but the frequency is FM, it's 88.0. So it's, if anybody wants to get on a push bike and you get on the push bike and you go over the wheel just goes around once, that's one cycle or 1 hertz. So we're going 88 within a second. And then we can put that's the carrier wave. And of course we can then put the music and the audio and all that stuff that goes on it. But underneath it, people don't realize you can have a sub carrier wave. So you can put something else there that you can send a stream of conversations, communications in that sub carrier wave. And people think, well, what are you talking about? But if you're here in Australia, you would have had Channel 7. And they, in the early days of TV, when PayPal came out, they had teletext, and you had a little remote, and you could click the little thing, teletext, and you could go there and had all these different little prompts there, and you can go and read the world news, get the weather, get the footy, and all that stuff. So that actually operated on the subcarrier wave, and so messages could be put through on the subcarrier wave. Where I'm going with this conversation is that we had Michael Gray-Griffith on the show several weeks ago.
Hi, Michael.
He's been traveling around Australia. Yeah.
Yep.
I classify him as the last remaining investigative journalist in Australia. Since the days of Australia 60 Minutes with George Negus and Ray Martin, Ian Leslie, and Event. Because he's been talking to individuals out in the suburbs and out in the country in the bush. And so, Michael, I said to him, how is it that close to, whatever the figure is, 1 million people in Australia descended in Canberra? Just came out of nowhere, descended in Canberra. And it wasn't through mainstream media. Not one TV station, not one radio station, one newspaper said, come on down to Canberra. So my point to Michael was, what frequency, what telepathic brainwave pattern were those people operating on that had a desire to go to Canberra? So what frequency? So if you're looking at brainwave activity when you're in ICU and they're seeing whether or not you're still going to be alive and you're not brain dead or whatever, if you're looking at 5G frequency, you're looking at 6G frequency, how far do you get into that wavelength there that you can then impact on the human synopsis to send a message to an individual to say, I want you to do that, or I want you to do this?
It's an interesting one, that one, because like I get shot down in flames for this, but this is a fact. Like, you take a 5G tower, if you're too close to the antennas, I think it's 10 or 15 meters horizontally and vertically, but there's a ground current around the base of the tower anyway, which goes to the boundary of the property that's on. That's how ground currents work, localized. The radio frequency wave, after a certain distance, drops off to a point there's no electromagnetic energy. It's just a wave, and it doesn't cause any effect on the Chinese meridians or peripheral nervous system. And that's a fact, but the problem is the average person is being led to believe that that's what I'm saying is wrong because of all the armchair experts out there around the world with radio frequency meters picking up high readings of radio frequency from the towers in people's houses, but not realizing that there's not enough voltage in the air to cause the Chinese meridian stress. It's a really interesting one. And the federal government has a website talking about how there's no electromagnetic energy in the air. So there's no charge in the air. But who believes the federal government these days? So, and if you talk to the telcos, the people who make the equipment, install the equipment, things like that, they know that. Like, if you might see on a Facebook post somewhere where a grouchy old ex-telco technician will get on and growl at some fearmonger saying, "Oh, the tower down the road is going to kill me," and the telco guy comes along and says, "No, you bloody idiot! You don't know what you're talking about." And everyone throws rocks at the telco guy, but the telco guy actually knows what he's talking about. It's really, really interesting. If you have charge fields, that's a different thing. Like the ground current's a charge field. And the other interesting thing, other theory going around about the streetlights is the radiation, the electromagnetic charge will have a direct impact on all those people who are COVID vaxxed. And that would hasten other vax injuries and things like that. But I haven't seen any studies anywhere to actually prove that. Like, it's just thrown up in the air. You don't know. Like, I've worked out ways how you could actually test that, but I haven't had a chance to do that. I haven't had the time to do that. It would be something I'd like to do further on down the track. But it's an interesting thing anyway. Can I move on to the vax shedding? Talk about that? Yeah, okay. So something that came out around roughly more 2021 was different health professionals around the world saying that the vaccine, the COVID vaccine, the COVID vax people were shedding spike protein and glyphosate oxide to other people. And that was then infecting other people who were not vaccinated, and they were getting sick. And I didn't believe it all the way along. I saw lots of live blood videos showing what's happening to the blood and of non-vax people saying, oh, it's the spike protein, it's the graphene oxide and things like that. And I still didn't believe it because I know a few really good live blood experts, and they say, no, that's the amateurs not knowing the radiation damage that's done to the blood, because the blood can do all sorts of things when you highly radiate it. And I even went to a point of actually buying from Equilibrium, the kinesiology suppliers in Australia, graphene oxide and spike protein testing vials, and with my own bioresonance equipment, tested a group of people that were COVID vaccinated, and they naturally had the graphene oxide and the spike protein, and the people who were not vaxxed, none of them showed up with the bioresonance testing. But one thing, I, being a radiation person, worked out very, very early in 2020, when it's not long after the vax came out, that a person who's COVID vaxxed, their biofield energy, the energy around their body, due to, I say probably the graphene oxide, because if you know what the electrical potential is of the graphene oxide, it's amazing, talking like Donald Trump, but anyway, causes the red blood cells to go from negative charge to positive charge, which means negatively charged, they're not clumping, positive they are. It causes the Chinese meridian energy to go from supplying a negative charge frequencies through the body to the vital organs, so that the Chinese meridians were then supplying a positive charge to the vital organs, which is de-energizing the organs. And it was having an effect on the nervous system, especially the brain, due probably to brain blood barrier issues to do with probably mercury and things like that. But I leave that to those other experts. And so the electrical field around the body, the brain, the nervous system was polarized from negative charge to positive charge, which meant the human biofield became a radiation field. And the problem with that is that in the very beginning, when a person that's been COVID vaxxed meets up with a person that's not been COVID vaxxed, when they're within 1.5 meters of each other, speaking facetiously, the person that's COVID vaxxed electromagnetically imprints a person that's not COVID vaxxed. And so what happens then is that when the non-vaxxed person walks away from the meeting with the vaxxed person, their biofield energy is a radiation field, very similar to the vaxxed people. But there's one difference, is that the vaxxed people, their biofield energy radiation is all the way around the body, whereas the non-vaxxed people, their biofield energy was only around the sides of their bodies, but not above the head. And that's how I worked out in 2021 that not a single state premier around Australia who were big vax pushers, or all the big NGO-backed and government vax pushers around Australia and around the world, not a single one of them were COVID vax, because I'd worked out the difference between the two of them. And a lot of the politicians around Australia, especially some premiers, were on television getting a fake vax. And a certain prime minister got a fake vax, which was a retracting needle, and you just have to ask the nurses around Australia who saw that. They were rolling on the floor laughing their heads off.
Of course.
But
that individual gave, if you're thinking of monopoly, that certain gentleman gave a community get out of jail card for politicians, members of the judiciary.
Yeah, we know about that, yeah.
And so people in the pharmaceutical industry.
Yeah, exactly. So but then it goes further than that. The person who walked away, who's non-vaxxed, is now vax-shedded. When they meet up with their other non-vax friends, and it seemed to be the way at the time, and now still, the non-vaxxed who's shedded then sheds the other non-vaxxed friend. And it goes on and on and on. If you go back to 2020, or late 2021 is a big year for Melbourne. If you're vax-shedded, you are technically very unwell, and there's all sorts of symptoms that occur when you're vax-shedded. And what Daniel Andrews was saying to us, we're not going to open up until we flatten the curve, so to speak. And everyone was out. I hate to say this, normies, but unfortunately, yes, we're all out getting their COVID tests. They're all lining up in the queues of cars, getting the the thing up the nose to see whether they had COVID or not, because everyone was in fear. And they were all shedded. And if you, as I said, if you're shedded, you are technically unwell. And these people who were not vaxxed were getting shedded, thinking they had COVID, but not all the shedding has a flu type or a cold type of symptom, thinking they had COVID. So they're all out getting PCR tested. And as we know now, a lot of them weren't done properly. And there was a lot of false positives, which was keeping the curve from flattening, which was keeping us from being locked up. So it was like like a lot of people seem to say that there's no such thing as a virus, but there was an energetic virus, so to speak, or that would be the best way to call it, which was spreading from person to person. It wasn't a physical thing they were taking in, it was an energetic thing. And that's never happened to the human population before, I don't ever think. The only thing with a non-vax person where they would have a biofield energy which was distorted above the head, the only complication there would be for someone who has Epstein-Barr virus. Because if you've got Epstein-Barr virus, it's inflammation of the nervous system, it affects the brain, it affects the electrical field around the brain and the whole energy around the body. That's a whole other subject. But I'm seeing it through inquiries to do property readings, which I do over the phone, and a lot of the health practitioners I speak to around Australia who are, good top quality kinesiologists, bioresonance practitioners, people like that, some really good naturopaths, integrated doctors and people like that, they're seeing an increase in people presenting with Epstein-Barr virus. And if you talk to some of these people who know this stuff, but they keep their head under the radar, they'll say that they believe that maybe the EBV and other things is in the vaccine. Like if you heard of Judy Mitkovich, she talks about this. She's spoken about this in a book, I think it was called Plandemic or something a few years ago, which I believe might be difficult to get these days. So it's a really interesting thing. And I call it the most dangerous form of radiation because, let's see, if we go back to the radiating streetlights, if you went and put your hand on a metal pole which had a radiating streetlight on it, you're subjecting yourself to a lot of electromagnetic charge. When you walk away from that pole, you don't get an energetic imprinting like you do from being around another person who's energetically shedding to you and other people around you, whether they're vaccinated or not. And so it's a real interesting thing. Many years ago, I was reading a post on an American-based forum. I think it was before the days of Facebook when forums were a big thing. And this forum was spirituality, UFOs and anti-gravity, free energy, that type of forum. And there was this one post by this one bloke, and he said something really, really interesting. And I'll never forget it too. He said, the mythical Alpha Draconian race, which, people talk about and no one knows whether it's true or not, and some people might know that, the truth about it, had a plan in the future to lower the vibration of the human race. And when I heard it long time ago, I thought, how are they going to do that? What's the mechanism going to be to do that? Well, the vax was a mechanism because what they've done is lowered the vibration of the human race. Like I watch lots of things on Facebook and Telegram and things like that, and I get accused by my wife of spending way too much time on Facebook. But what I'm doing is reading people's energies and situations. And if you look at the energy of a crowd, of a big crowd, like say that, in a stadium, of 2000, before March 2020, or April, May, whenever the vax came in, or August, whatever. So 2019, the energy of the crowd would be high vibration because the human race, the average person's energetic polarity was correct. Negative charge at the bottom, positive, a lesser, you would call a positive charge to the ground, but it still wasn't positive. It was still in the negative spectrum, so to speak. And the crowd energy would have a really nice energy. You look at a crowd these days, unless there's a stellar dome or a geocleanse at the venue, which is a common thing these days, if there's any of those products, they have an effect on all the people, which turns their energy back to negative charge. But without that, the energy of the crowd is quite a toxic positive charge. And that's a really big thing. That's never seen that happen before. So that's what's happened. That's what really is going on with the vac shedding. I personally don't get shedded if I'm going out and about anywhere I go. I wear my Stella pendant. This is a new one coming. We haven't released it yet. I'm not going to tell what we're going to call it. Keep that quiet. And the Stella pendant protects from the vac shedding. I will say this, and it's a fact, we're the only people in the world that can neutralise the vac shedding. There are people who sell black rocks who say they can do that. Rubbish. I've tested it. It does nothing. Kinesiology testing, the bioresonance testing shows it all. Anyway, what the symptoms for me when I'm vac shedded, I do get shedded when I do house consults, regardless of whether the host is actually vaxxed or not. A lot of them, it's a mix for me. And so if they're not vaxxed, they're still shedding, so I get shedded. And these are my symptoms personally. My ears block. I feel sick in the stomach. I lose my balance. I'm 61, but I'm still relatively fit, so I'm not all over the place. And I don't have a dodgy hip either. I feel really depressed. I get really a melancholy feeling, and that's not me. People who know me, and they know I'm always upbeat and happy, and get along with people and have a good time and raise people's vibrations by having a bit of a joke and things like that, getting a giggle out of people, like we had with our staff. They're fantastic people. Anyway, that's what happens to me. And the first time I got shedded was really, really spooky. It was a house consult in 2020 when they said, you're all locked down. It was like, bugger you. I've got to go and do this work. And the hostess, when I got to the house, she was not vaxxed, but her husband was vaxxed. And she was shedded, and she shedded me for the first time. And all those symptoms came on. I was disorientated energetically. I couldn't work out what was Arthur or Martha energetically in the house and the different rooms. It was really scary. And then at the end of the consult, I thought, okay, I'm vax shedded, and I wasn't wearing my pendant because I don't in my consults. And I fixed it in the end by going to the car, grabbing a pendant, putting on me, and giving the girl one to put on, so it neutralised her. And when you put our harmonizers on, if you're being shedded, it neutralises the shed, it rebalances the biofuel, and that terrible energetic feeling goes away. But the thing is, though, these days, that there's a lot of people out there who have got in their biofuel because they're vaccinated, or they aren't vaccinated in their biofuel, and they can't feel anything. They're not tuned into their body, which is a shame. But there's a massive percentage of people out there, especially women, because women are more sensitive to energies than men are. That's a fact. And it's especially women who are aware of their bodies, how their body feels, and they're getting shedded, and they don't know what the hell's going on with them. And the longer you're shedded, the more your background really niggly things going on with your health, which might be not happening now or before the shedding started, have started to arc up again, if you know what I mean. And they've got no idea what's going on. And eventually they come to me. They might hear about other podcasts and things like where I've spoken about the shedding, and they'll go, oh, well, maybe I'll have a chat to this guy and give him a call and see what's going on. And it's always that shedding that's dragging them down. So
I say, obviously, in a workplace environment, there'll be a high concentration of people who've had the vaccine, so they're all shedding that. But also, when you mentioned about the husband, obviously had to get the vaccine for his job and security and stuff, and so the wife didn't have to have it. But the next scenario is the actual relationship where you're actually now having a sexual union, because that's what husband and wives do in the matrimonial bed.
Yep.
How does that affect the? I mean, there's bodily fluids, and you notice, even if we weren't talking about the vax, you notice that when people get together, you can see over a period of time that without them thinking, they actually start becoming color coordinated, and then they start talking about subjects, and the other one finishes the subject, and over a period of time, you start to see how they seem to morph and take on the physicality of the partner.
It's an interesting one though. I get asked that a lot. I actually don't know. I haven't done any experiments, so to speak, on that, if you know what I mean. I don't know, and I don't see it coming up a lot as a subject. Like Telegram to me seems to be a good platform, and X is a great platform too. But Telegram before X got changed for the better was always something that was a go-to where you weren't getting censored. And I was expecting to start seeing, different scientists and doctors around the world and different people around the world doing studies on that and coming up with results. But I haven't seen. It's virtually boom, nothing. So it's a big question, that one. I do know that this is for a fact. And I've seen that with a family member who was COVID vaxxed while she was pregnant, and the child, when it was born, has the vaccine in it because a child, or a baby especially, but a child has a radiance. They give off a strong negative charge. So, for example, in my consultancy work, if I in a house, I go room to room to room to room, and we look at different aspects. So you walk into the parents' bedroom, and you don't know who's slept in that bedroom over, say, 20, 30 years of the history of a house, and you'd have a lower energy in the bedroom due to people's energy, which is a bioplasmic imprint. Not all the time, but in a lot of cases. But then you go into the children's bedrooms, and you walk into the bedrooms, and there's a lightness in the air. That's that bioplasmic frequency, the imprint that the children give off. And they create like a self-protection in their rooms, which is a radiation protection. So you might have a death on a property and you have ground current. And if you walk into a bathroom or the parents' bedroom, they might have a mirror. And if you've had a death on the property, you'll get a radiation charge coming off the mirror. It's quite a spooky, funny thing. But you can walk into the children's bedroom, there'll be a mirror, and because of their radiance, there'll be no charge coming off it. So just to give an example. But this baby, who's now a 4-year-old, 3-year-old, I think now, still has the stuff in her body, and her body's radiating at a positive charge, and it's no fault of her own. It's the fault of whoever made the mother get the vax while they were pregnant without any knowledge of what was going to happen, because that happened in 2020, I think it was. It's so, and another thing with the vax people and the non-vax people is that, like in Melbourne with COVID, you could rely out for 1 hour a day, and everyone went out and bought a Labradoodle. Really, really common thing. It's quite funny. And so they're out walking their dogs every afternoon to get their 1 hour of exercise. And animals have a nice vibration, a nice resonance. Not as great as the children, but it's on that side of things. And the animals, the dogs and the cats and everything, were getting shedded just like the other people, adults. The children didn't get shedded, don't get shedded, unless the children have autoimmune disease or cancers and things like that, where their energy is low and they're susceptible to it. However, a COVID vax or a person who's shedding gets within 8 meters of a child, then their energy starts to compress a bit, but doesn't get shedded. They don't get shedded at all. So we do dog and cat pendants, and people have said for years, why don't you do dog and cat pendants? And I'm saying, well, we really don't need to do them. Get real about this thing. Their resonance neutralizes radiation, but now we've got a situation where the dogs and cats are getting shedded and they're getting sicker. And I'm hearing stories from people, lots of people. And that's why we had to eventually do dog and cat pendants, because I eventually, after all, over a period of time, found with the vax shedding that we then had a need to actually protect them. Horses are another one too.
I was just trying to find his name. Might be Craig, isn't it? His name is Chappell, and Greg Chappell. He's like the same cricketer. He lives on the Gold Coast. He's an animal whisperer. People bring their animals to him, and he goes for the healing. He will say 90% of the time, the animal is bringing the human for the healing. So the animal goes out in empathy with the actual human and shows these things. And so he comes to see bloody Greg, and then Greg says, "Oh, okay." And then tells the human, "Oh, you need to you need to go and see a specialist yourself." Yeah, so the animals do go and go out in empathy,
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So then, as time went on, from 2021 to 2024, then all the lockdowns finished and everything like that, we had a situation where, for my company, we do a lot of the large mind, body, spirit expos around Australia. And we've been doing them since 2008. We've done 76 or 77 of them now. Anyway, we had a situation coming up where we had a problem where if you have a big auditorium with lots of people, a couple of thousand people walking around in close proximity, with the vac shedding, you had a situation where the energy of the whole building would just be absolutely toxic. So I had to develop a counter frequency to the products that do whole buildings by generating a negatively charged ground current throughout the whole building that would neutralize the people's energy, not just the earth radiation and all the other things that might be going on in the building, the ground current from the three-phase power or whatever, So we had to develop a counter frequency to neutralize the people. And for me, that was like, wow, I've never thought we'd get to the point where we were looking at the average person as being a source of dangerous radiation and this infectious radiation like a virus. So in November 21, I worked out the counter frequency for our Stelladome and GeoCleanse so that they would then have the counter frequency to the vac shedding, so it would neutralize all the people in the building. And that was a really big job I had to do, because it would be nothing worse, as I said, but 2,000 people in the one building all shedding on each other. It was absolutely toxic. We went a step further in July last year, where because of the awareness of an increase in Epstein-Barr virus, and the Epstein-Barr virus biofilm radiation is a completely different frequency to the vac shedding. So the vac shedding counter frequency doesn't cover the EBV people, that we had to put the EBV counter frequency into the harmonizers in all of our products, but especially the products that do whole buildings, to neutralize the EBV people, because they're becoming, how would you put it? It's like an epidemic of it happening. So we're the only harmonizer manufacturer in the world that has these expertise to be able to go, right, there's a change in what's going on energetically on the planet, and there's always a counter frequency to it. And the counter frequency is always a frequency that generates a negative charge, because you neutralize radiation that has a positive charge with a negative charge. It's always a balancing act. There are some products on the market which are $2,500, $3,000, which are absolute junk, and they're designed to neutralize radio frequency wave, which is harmless in general sense, and they're actually using a frequency that creates a positive charge of radiation to neutralize something that isn't really harmful for only 8 meters, and it's actually causing a bigger radiation danger than what's really going on. It's quite funny, but yeah, it's the world we're living in these days. It's quite amazing.
We had Dr. Sam on 6 weeks ago, I think, and he came to Australia. Dr. Sam was the guy who got a PhD in pyramids and stuff around Central South America, but he ended up in Bosnia, and just after the Bosnian conflict with the Serbians and the Croatians, and he discovered this mountain, and he looked at it, and its geometrical shape was that of a pyramid. And so now they've been excavating these tunnels, and I had the privilege of going there last year for a scientific conference with 7 specialists of different disciplines. But as you walk through the tunnels, just an ordinary pair of shorts and a t-shirt and some runners, you go in there. We went about 360 meters into the tunnels there, and you can sit there and you just can close your eyes if you like, or you just sit there and have a chat. But when you come out, you really feel 10-foot tall and bulletproof. Fantastic. And it's only because it's full of negative ions.
Yeah, that pyramid is quite special. Like, I've done the pyramid thing 20-something years ago, the meditating under the pyramid, and a pyramid generally creates a radiation charge within and underneath it. But that one pyramid is a very, very special pyramid, because I remember about 5, 6, 7 years ago, a mate of mine from Queensland went to Bosnia to that pyramid, because of the energy of that pyramid, which is quite unique. And there were sightings of beams of charge going out above the top of the pyramid, which had a strong negative charge. It's like the Great Pyramid in Giza. Of all those pyramids, that's the only one that produces a negative charge, and the rest of them actually are producing a positive charge due to other things that are going on. But that's a very famous pyramid, yeah, and it's noted for that. And because you're underground, and if you're underground, if you've had nothing untoward happening, say in a cave or something underground, you are going to get a natural negative charge. And because the energetics of that particular site, and you don't know what ley lines are running into it and things like that, which would be feeding it with the negative charge, it would be a very nice experience for sure. But my days of meditating under a pyramid didn't last very long, because it used to make me really cranky. And after a while, I was tuning into the energy and going, "Oh, it's not such a good thing." So that's why we don't do pyramid harmonizers. We don't make orgonite, which is the stuff with the metal filings. I discovered about 20-something years ago that the orgonite with the metal filings was actually creating a radiation charge. I went on to develop my technology, which we call Orgonium, which is purely frequency infusion. And I developed my frequency skills over a period of a number of years after I first developed my first bioresonance equipment and started delving into counter frequencies for neutralizing ailments in the body, which I don't do as a practitioner, so I do it for myself and my wife. But I built on my frequency knowledge, and then was able to then start developing counter frequencies to different things. And the first one, the big thing, was the back shedding. We did have to develop a counter frequency when digital TV came out in around early 2000s, because digital TV, surprise, surprise, is the most dangerous appliance in the house.
Which one?
Like, people would say smart meter, but smart meter, okay, you get electromagnetic field 2 meters around that. Beyond it's just waves, so you don't really have to worry about that. But if you've got a digital TV on a wall, it will create an electromagnetic beam of energy the size and the shape of the screen in front of it for 50, 60 meters.
Oh, true.
Yep, and
is that the plasma ones or the LED screens?
Doesn't matter which one. It's the frequency that's driving them. I'm not a technician, so all I'm just saying is what we know and what we can feel and what we can show is actually coming from a digital TV. And the digital TV, funny thing, in the very beginning was sold to Australians as, oh, these are much safer than your what were they? The old style TV. What was it? I even forget the name. It's so long ago. Because our old TVs, the big box TVs, they did create a radiation charge in front of them for about 2 meters. I remember when I was a kid, but even my mother saying, "Don't sit too close to the TV." It's a funny thing. Like, she was not aware of these types of things back then, but she was aware of that, which was really quite funny. And the electric blanket, being in Melbourne, was a big thing. And a lot of people were in the 70s really aware of the radiation dangers of sleeping on an electric blanket, and to turn it on before you went to bed, then when you turn it off when you got into bed. But little kids like me would jump into bed, turn it back on up to 3, and have a toasty night's sleep. And I remember waking up one morning, staggering out to the couch because I'd been frying myself all night long, collapsing on the couch and having no energy at all, and saying, "Mum, I can't go to school." And she walked down in the bedroom, saw I'd left the electric blanket on 3, came back out and said, "No way, you're going to school."
Yeah, okay, that's a good one. So now people are like you. You've got your bamboo blanket, and other people have the the magnetic blankets. For any particular reason?
Yeah, magnets are great for blood, but they have a polarity issue and a radiation issue. The magnets do a lot of good things in the right application. Our blankets are frequency infusion. It's a system I developed many, many years ago, where I can infuse negatively charged frequencies into the blanket, and the blanket will forever hold that frequency. The blanket, you can wash it a million times and it would never lose its frequency. It's a funny one because I spoke to a clothing expert recently. They said, oh, bamboo's got a really, really bad energy, but with our frequency infusion, we correct that energy. A lot of people sleep on them and getting great results, and we're going to release a sleep sheet later on this year. And one reason we're releasing that is that there's a lot of earthing products being sold out there and they're incredibly dangerous, and that the earthing industry is run by marketing companies. And I want to highlight the dangers of the earthing products and give people a safe alternative. If you want a frequency sheet, if you want something that's tried and proven, and our technology is, use this. And because the whole idea is electron donation. If you're in contact with something that's giving a negative, resonating at a negative charge frequency, is going to donate electrons. And if you Google that, and I've seen some great Facebook reels which were reproductions from video from the 70s and 80s and 90s of different people talking about the benefit of electron donation. And you're not getting electron donation with earthing mats. You're getting proton donation, but in this story about the earth carrying a negative charge, which is determined by a multimeter. The multimeter is wrong. It's to the human body. That's not a negative charge. It's a positive charge. And now we've got this ground current from the streetlights everywhere. It's even a bigger problem. So yeah, the blankets are great. They've been a really nice, soothing product for lots of people all over the world.
Yeah, because a lot of people, well, I say a lot of people, there's been people in my sort of influence have been getting grounding sheets and explaining how therapeutic they are for a good night's sleep.
Yeah, it's not, because you think of it, the earth wire is bound to the positive and negative. So if you get a length of electrical wiring, and say with a biotensor, not an EMF meter, because EMF meters are so inaccurate, using a subtle energy tool like a biotensor, that earth wire is going to have a radiation field like that all the way around it. Excuse my dodgy finger. And that means that the earth wire isn't carrying the negative charge from the ground. It's actually carrying the positive charge because it's connected to the positive and negative. And copper wiring carries a positive charge. So when you plug that into the earth pin, you've got protons going through the mat, and when you touch that, you got proton donation, which de-energizes the Chinese meridians. And it's interesting in the beginning because the earthing people were selling it as EMF protection. And I pulled them up on that, and other experts around the world pulled them up on that. So then they changed their marketing to, oh, you'll sleep better, and you get a placebo effect, yes, but you also get people sleeping better because it's had a huge negative effect on the central meridian, the heart meridian, and the circulation, and the pericardium meridian. And when you get a lot of heart stress, it wears people out, and they might get a deeper sleep. But if you're really asking how they're waking up, and I've spoken to lots and lots of them over the last 15 years, they don't wake up as well as they thought they did. A lot of fluffy testimonials. It doesn't take much to pay someone to say something. Oh, it's really good. You know what I mean? But you've been using your Geracleanse. So the upside of that is a Geracleanse, because it's donating an electron through the electrical system. So the electrical fields then become negatively charged. That then saves the earthing mat. You don't get the positive charge. You're getting the negative charge with a harmonizer like the Geracleanse. So you're okay. Just to give an example, if you measured the radiation charge coming up above a bed from an electric blanket, which is about a metre above the bed, you'll get the same effect from an earthing mat without using a Geracleanse. I'm not talking about this to bag it or promote something else. This is a reality, and this is something that no one wants to talk about because everyone's on the earth treadmill because of the marketing is so wholesome. There's nothing better. What a great sales and marketing thing, earthing, and how wonderful is that? But there's actually some wrong information in the middle of that. And it's funny too, because in the past on Facebook ads, I used to put up there, but hang on, what about the electrical charge and what the facts I was talking about before? And you get a lot of people responding saying, never thought of that. That actually makes a lot of sense. And a few electricians saying, yeah, absolutely. And there are other safety issues with that too if you've got something wrong with your electrical system. That's why a lot of the earthing people are selling testers now. And if the tester says don't plug the mat in and touch the mat, they mean it for a reason, because it could be sparky.
Right.
Interesting.
So, where would you like to take this conversation? Because it's okay, wait, when you say grounding current, for people who are listening,
the ground current is a radiation charge that goes through the ground and above the ground, and it goes horizontally. So you'll have a tower, you'll have a street light, and you'll have another street light. They've both antennas in them. The antennas create a charge that goes down the pole and then emanates out from each street light. And it joins up and down the street. But then that goes through everyone's properties. And that radiation is to 2 meters above the ground. And when it gets to a property, you might have a 4-story house, the radiation will go through the house and will totally engulf the house from bottom to top. That's what a ground current's like. And it causes what's called geopathic stress in the body. And if you talk to a naturopath or a bioresonance practitioner or a well-trained kinesiologist, they'll tell you, a lot of them will tell you that in their testing or their pre-testing, when they're doing work on clients, the first things they test for are electromagnetic and geopathic stress. And the geopathic is always a bigger danger than the electromagnetic. And I know of some practitioners around who say, unless you're using something like this to neutralize the geopathic and the electromagnetic, don't come and see them. You're wasting your time, because no matter what the work they do, if you go back into the environments where you have a prominent positive charge in the air, so that ground current is undoing all the healing work that's being done. High possibility of that. So that's
because you came from Victoria, or you come from Victoria, the largest retail builder was AV Jennings, and they used to do cut and slab. So they go in there, get the dozer and then put a big slab, and then build a single story or 2-story brick veneer.
Built one in 1988, absolutely.
Right. So, but when they came to Queensland, of course, Queensland was a bit like West Indies, and every house was sitting off the ground on 6-foot, 8-foot stumps, and they had a big veranda out it. And basically, that was just for the air conditioning for those hot, balmy nights. But when the Victorian Society came up here and thought, well, no, we'll bring our customs and traditions of cut and slab, and then obviously the next thing is to reduce the facade, what do you call it? Comes off the roof line, and you go off the wall there. There used to be 900, just under a meter off the wall, and your roof line will go out. What do you call that?
The eaves.
Yeah, the eaves. Sorry. Yeah. So, in order to be commercially competitive, they started building the Mediterranean homes, which chopped the eaves back to 300. And so then the sun was coming through on the eastern walls, and then the western wall at night, a western wall for the evening sun, which is heating those walls up where everybody was sleeping. And so everybody then had to go and get air conditioning. And so now the power resolution and the whole home became a real electromagnetic field. But the old days of being on stumps and allowing nature to be the air conditioning unit and having big wide verandas went out of the door because of a Victorian influence. It sounds like I've just done an under delivery there to you. Sorry about that. Is there any cause for concern? Because the Scandinavians learned pretty quickly that with their diminishing sunlight and the lack of vitamin D, and everybody was using air conditioning, they then realized that everybody was now in an environment of positive ions, and so they came up with negative ionizers to go into our buildings and train stations, railway stations, and department stores to actually balance out the energy field of an individual. So this is a very interesting subject, Gerard. I mean, how far do we go in the subject that we're talking about now?
Yeah, a reverse cycle engineer and reverse cycle air conditioner does create a charge field around it, but it doesn't project into the people. But you've got all these positively charged particles being blown through the air. And if you don't clean it, you'll get mold getting blown through the air, and you get mold in your body. It does a huge amount of damage. And in my house consults, I do them with Google Earth. I've got a way of actually checking a house using frequencies to matching to check whether they got black mold or aspergillus in the house. And you can actually work out whether the mold's in the people. And in Victoria, it'll be from the reverse cycle. It's not just air conditioning; it's also heating too. A lot of Victorians use that all the way through summer. For the New South Wales, Queensland, it's for the summertime where it's the aircon. I can't stand being in a room with a reverse cycle air conditioner or heater being on, and that those positively charged dust particles in the air, it makes you feel sick, just sick to the stomach. Even thinking about it makes me go, oh, yuck. Well, the first house I ever lived in was back in 2008 that had reverse cycle. Prior to that, we had other types of heating in other houses. And when I first experienced it, was like, wow, this is something very, very interesting. And so with that house, every 2 months religiously, I was up there cleaning the filters out, demolding it, doing everything I could to make sure the thing was clean.
Right.
They're another aspect of noxious energy producer that comes within building biology.
So the strongest negative ions that we can get is obviously going into the sea and having a swim in the salt water, or walking through native bush.
Yeah, native bush. A snow environment is probably the strongest, or the best. Have the most sympathetic frequency, so to speak, because it's the white and the crystallization and the energy of the crystallized shapes that gives off with the snow. If you're in Europe, there's a lot of fir trees and things like that are natural negative ion generators too, and the sea is one. But you take, say, an esplanade running along the beach, like on the Gold Coast or any coastal town around Australia, with those radiating streetlights, the ground current radiation goes into the ground and out into the water to about 150 metres beyond where everyone would be swimming. And so that, prior to the streetlights radiating, was not an issue. And if you went into the shallow water, you would get the true negative charge. But with the radiating streetlights, that water's now got a positive charge. Right. When we had retrogrades or high solar winds generating worldwide ground current, that would also have an effect in changing the resonance of the ocean. Although not many people were picking up on it. Like I'm a bit strange in the way that I read energy via muscle testing with the jaw and things like that, how I've developed it over the years. And that was just one of the things I was noticing.
I noticed when we get the big storms like we just recently had, going off to see the waterfalls and how they run is fantastic. Isn't it? You're seeing the water coming down there, and then all of a sudden, because
there's so much negative charge being created like that. It's such a meditative, relaxing sound too. Waterfalls are a great thing. I'm actually, I wouldn't say a fan of waterfalls, but whenever I'm on the Gold Coast, I like to go up to those falls in the Currumbin Valley. It's it's beautiful.
Yeah,
being in the nature and with the flowing water is something really special.
True. So shift the goalposts there and talk about America and the change of the political scene there, and how it's almost like a football team that's been put together of both Republicans and Democrats. Have come together, and obviously some of those people know how to run a business and know the costs of running a business, and
exactly,
and know the bottom line and where red ink is built, and they've got to get back into the positive charge. But for a country that's it's always been seen as the superpower, where they've got, was it 12 bloody aircraft carriers with 5,000 personnel with nuclear, they can go anywhere they want. It's been really interesting to read about a forensic reconciliation of government departments and seeing the amount of waste, fraud that's taken place. I, for one, are just sitting back and just watching, observing, and thinking that's something that most Western countries should be looking at, just not America. But it seems to be that the guys who are stepping up and doing it seem to be made to be the victim or the villains, isn't it?
Yeah, yep. Like I run a small business. I've got 7 or 8 staff. If I found someone doing what they're finding is being done over there in my own business, they'd be gone. You know what I mean? You just don't waste money, and you keep an eye on where it's going, because our little ATO loves taking everything you make. I don't blame them at all.
I step back and think, like, they're going to become a superpower upon a superpower, in the sense that, if you're a businessman, you're usually thinking, I think I might invest in that, because if your staff are going to get taxed, like, they work for the money and they're not going to get taxed. I mean, that's in the Bible, and I think that's in the Australian Constitution. Man shall not be taxed for their labour. I mean, I can only see fantastic, phenomenal growth, and allowing people the opportunity and hope to come back in America, where people can get on and start building things. Yeah,
exactly. Oh yeah, exactly. You can see that. Just to qualify, my staff would never do that. I've got the best staff you could ever possibly imagine in the world. They're all female, and I'm not diversity or anything like that. It's just how it turned out over the years, and they're brilliant. You couldn't fault them at all. But I totally agree with you.
Yeah, so we'll just wait to see where the buck lands, isn't it?
Oh, like to see that same thing happen in Australia. Boy, be an eye-opener, wouldn't it?
Well, if you want your steel and aluminium, I mean, and if the Europeans have now decided they're going to put a same sort of levy on it.
Yep.
Well, if I was a business that's running steel and aluminium in Europe, I think I might be going to America and setting up a shop over there, because it's the largest economy, in which case, they're going to be requiring all those services, because it seems to me the guy's going to reinvest in America and all its infrastructure, which is probably, well, I've been over in America and I've taken some big road trips over there, and I'm thinking, mate, you need to really do some major work here and bring this place up to scratch. And I can only see good things from him.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I know a lot of people in America who are huge supporters. I know some interesting things about some very influential, very powerful people over there in power who actually users of our products too. It's quite interesting. I won't go into that any depth, but yeah, very interesting.
I mean, the amount of people that Andrena and I have interviewed, I mean, from the mycelium network, the centrillium network for, obviously, sorry, mycelium for the fungi, and mycelium for the trees and the plant growth, the microbes from Bronwyn, just natural health people that we've had on the show. It seems to be that the guy who's been a Democrat royal family, the RFKs, come and join them to look at natural health and getting back to healthy foods and getting chemicals and glyphosate, like, is that how you say it? Out of the production of food. I can only see good, healthy, bloody Americans coming out of all this.
Yeah, and RFK is very radiation EMF aware. He did a podcast with a friend of mine, an associate of mine, last year, I think it was, and her Instagram page was called We Are Not Sam, and her cause is all about the fact that the telco industry doesn't use a real human being for their radiation safety testing. They use a foam dummy called Sam, and her cause is to make people aware of that. And she was granted a podcast with RFK last year where he was interested in talking to her about all those types of things. So the radiation thing might come up in his radar later on. I know which type of harmonizer he uses, in fact.
Right.
So there's some, that's a really exciting thing, that whole thing. It leads down another rabbit hole of things that people stick in people's arms. And, I don't want to go too far into that because there's people who like to censor things like that, especially now, but that could lead to exciting things in the next 10 years. Because if you ever meet a child that's not COVID vaxxed whatsoever, like, a 10, 12, 14, 15, 20-year-old, so not just COVID vaxxed, as in any vaccines, and there are a lot of them out there, especially in Queensland, they're superhuman people. They don't get colds or flus. They're good looking, they're intelligent, and they're grounded, nice people, more than the average. So the things other people put in people's arms, it's becoming highly plainly obvious that it was designed to diminish the human potential. And it's not just me saying that. Everyone's saying that these days. Everyone's waking up to that.
If we go into our agricultural industry, I mean, if it's in the poultry or if it's in the pigs or if it's in the beef or the mutton, they've always had some drenching or some antibiotic or something that's been placed into the animal stock.
At least it's not pumped straight into the body, and it's got mercury and all sorts of fetuses and all sorts of stuff like that in it. Because, like you look at the ADHD, the Epstein-Barr, God, all of that sort of stuff. Like, it's all coming out now. Like, they did a study on it a long time ago, and it was proven, and Big Pharma said, shit, we can't allow that to get out. So they did another one. Says, oh, no, it's disproven. And everyone just go home. It's all fine. We're all in control. Keep on doing it. So it's an interesting one. So it's the one sort of close to home for me, because over the last 25 years, I've done lots of house consults for people who've had vaccine-injured children who are autistic and things like that. And a few of them were doctors too, and they actually openly admitted it was the early childhood vaccines. And it's really, really sad to see. I've even got a grandchild who's where the mother was COVID vaxxed while she was pregnant. And it's really sad to see, because children shouldn't be like that. And
in the 50s, it was the middle white, wasn't it? As a morning sickness thing.
Yep. And like my ex-wife once said to me with my youngest daughter, when she took her to get a vaccine, an early childhood one when she was 2 years old, she was a completely different child after the vaccine, immediately after than before that. It's interesting. Like back in the 80s, everyone did it. If you said you were an anti-vaxxer or didn't want to vaccine and things like that, everyone look at you strange and go, go sit over in the corner type of thing. How things have changed, and especially since COVID, the whole COVID thing has sort of woken people up to what's going on.
We've had some really interesting people on the show. I mean, one lady was talking about the birth canal rebirthing. I was just fascinated listening to all the different concepts that can happen in the rebirthing from a child coming through the mother's whole system. But more importantly, once the child's born, actually keeping the umbilical cord still intact and handing the child over to the mother and holding it. And so the fluids come straight through the umbilical cord into that child, and it gives a child a bigger strength of immune bodies. Plus the mother's milk as well, so all that nutrients and all that stuff it comes back to what the mother's actually taken in and inputted into their own bodies, isn't it?
Yep. And it's interesting, where a child born, where the mother has the child, there's an energetic imprint left, which has a negative charge, which is the representation of the energy of the radiance of the child. And they're called birth imprints. I discovered them a long, long time ago. And it's interesting, like, if you're sensitive to energy, And I remember this when my three children were born. Every time, naturally, they were born in a hospital ward, and that after the birth, you'd probably go home, have a shower, have a sleep, come back to be with the wife and the newborn baby. And as you were, I remember this distinctly, as you were getting near the maternity ward or whatever it was, the energy would change and you'd feel it in your nervous system, and you would get this nice, happy sort of feeling as you're getting close to it, because a hospital's energy is terrible because of all the death and things. But this birthing ward area would have this really brilliant, bright energy, which is from all the births in that particular section. And so that's not why home births are popular, but people who do home birth, they don't know that they're actually creating a nice little commemorative energy imprint in their house exactly where the baby's been born. How I discovered these was many, many years ago, like 15, 18 years ago, going to a house in Somerville and for a house consult, and I get there and the mother's there with a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old, and the mother said, in the lounge room here, is there anything in particular energetically that stands out? And I sort of scanned around the way I do and I said, well, there's a really nice energy there, and there's a line running off it. And the little 4-year-old said, that's where I was born. I was like, oh, okay, I'm learning something new here. You learn as you go all the time. And then we went into the kitchen and the mother said, what about in here? And I said, well, okay, I'm feeling the same energy in this section of the kitchen as what I did in the lounge room. I was told that was a birth imprint, so that's obviously another one. She said, well, that's where the 2-year-old was born. That's how I learnt about them. But that was long after the experience in the maternity wards back in from about 1989 to 1989 till I think the last child was born in 1995. And that was in Frankston Hospital. And then years later, they demolished the maternity ward to build a new hospital. And I remember being in the old section of the hospital, looking down on the construction site where the maternity ward actually existed, but no longer existed, was new columns and suspended slabs and everything being built. And that imprint was still there. Nothing had disturbed it, even though the physical structure had been taken away. The energy was still present in that actual space.
You used the word imprint. It's really interesting because the first time I came across the word imprint was in the trilogy of the Twilight movies.
Yep.
Between the vampires and the werewolves. Yeah.
Oh yeah, I've never seen it.
Oh, have you? Oh, okay. Yeah. So the native Red Indians were able to transform themselves into wolves.
Yep.
Forget werewolves. Wolves. And when the human woman hooked up with the vampire fella and had a child, that child imprinted on the Native American guy. Yeah. And then when they said that, the word was imprint. And from that moment, that child saw the Indian guy as the guardian, the guide, and ended up marrying him because of the bloodline inside the child hit the vampire network, and so it quickly grew into and transformed into a adult form within 7 years. And so so the imprint was the first time it ever came in, was in that particular movie. But you've just mentioned it today, and I thought, well, that's really interesting how it comes about.
An imprint is a weird thing. That can't be measured with an EMF meter. That's why I use the biotensors. And it comes from, like a death imprint. At the time of death, there's a huge emotional pain body charge coming from the body, and that's highly positively charged. So the person drops dead, they come along, take the body away and bury it. But that from the process of the death, this electromagnetic field, which is in the form of an imprint, is being left. And in the event of a death, you get a ground current radiation going throughout the whole properties, which stops at the boundaries.
Right.
And imprint stays there until something comes along which has an opposing counter frequency, and the imprints can actually be removed, and they don't come back. If you get a house built, saying like a really old electrical system, a house built in the 1940s or 50s or 60s or something like that, where the electrical systems weren't as robust as now, the power points would create big imprints around them to about 1.5 meters all the way around. And if you weren't turned the power supply off, those imprints would still stay there until something like a geocleanse came along and you had the counter frequency to neutralize the imprints. And so a digital TV, that energy beam in front of a TV is an imprint. You turn the thing on, that energy beam is created, which is positively charged, which is harmful radiation. You turn the TV off, and that will still be there, although not as strong as when it was on. You could move the TV to another location, and that imprint will still be there until a geocleanser or a stellar neutralises that and removes the imprint.
Is that right? I remember being in Wales. I was out to Bardsley Island, and they reckoned they used to take all the Celtic, druids and all that stuff. They'd march them down through this town of Rua and come out to Aberon, and then they rode them across to Bardsley Island. And people who we met at Rua used to say sometimes, depending on the night, you could actually hear the procession bringing the people from the past, might be 100 years ago or 200 years ago, down that narrow street to go down to Aberon. It's like,
that's a phenomenon. That's a phenomenon that actually does exist. Very, very sensitive people can tune into that. I have a friend in Queensland that can tune into that. She's on the Sunshine Coast, and many, many years ago, we did some, not energy work, I did some demonstrating of using different energy tools in a parkland on the beach at Coolum, and she could tune into that, and she was tuning into that exact type of thing, where what she was picking up on were a lot of Aboriginals talking. It's a phenomenon that does occur, absolutely.
My mate who passed away, was one of England's best clairvoyant medium and healers. He didn't realise that he grew up in a family of spiritual mum and dad, and every Friday night people would come over to their place and he'd be sent downstairs, and they'd go upstairs and do their stuff. So he found out some years later that they created a physical presence with the ectoplasm and stuff like that. And on this particular occasion, they created a portal in the middle of the circle, and they could see down, and there was a French general kneeling down at the tombstone, praying to God for food and water for his army, for his soldiers, because they've been surrounded by the Huns. And so the group in England, up in Yorkshire, shut the circle down, and they all went off to Tesco's and Morrison's and Waitrose, and they brought all this bread and cask of water and stuff, and they put it in the center of that circle, and they reopened their circle, and no sooner as that general, back in the bloody 17th century, 16th century, or whatever it was, finished his prayer, the bread and all the water went straight through, and boom, was there.
It's spooky stuff, yeah. Many, many years ago, I don't know if you know of a guy, an English guy. I don't know whether he's still alive or not. Harry Oldfield.
Oh, yeah, Harry. Yeah, he had the camera or the.
I bought an NEV system from him many, many years ago. I used to have a curling camera. I've still got a curling camera, but I had a better one years ago when they were much better quality. He had a really interesting, I think it was a video. Yeah, it was a YouTube video or something I saw where, with his unique photography in an old English house, he was taking photos of different rooms, and what was showing up was images of people dressed in clothing from 150 years ago or something like that. And it wasn't trick photography, and it wasn't AI because it didn't exist back then. And it wasn't Photoshop stuff. It was genuine stuff. That's what he was known for, and that was a similar type of thing. Like,
yeah, but Rex Gilroy, he passed away now, but he came from up in the Blue Mountains, or he's sometime around there, and he would say that up in the Blue Mountains there was a time and a place when he actually turned up, and that was a lookout, and this 1920s vehicle, brand new, turned up, and the husband and wife got out wearing period costumes, and they came out and looking over there, and he was looking at them, and they were looking at him, and then they looked at his car, he looked at their car, and then they got back in the car, and they just disappeared.
There's all sorts of strange things that go on, like the skeptics and the haters will go, oh, it's all woo-woo, it doesn't exist, and how to prove it, and where's the science, and blah, 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 blah. That's what we say to them now. But yeah, it's what they call it, the world of the paranormal and phenomenal. That's what it is. We think we know everything.
I think it was 1986. Yeah, I went to listen to Dr. J.J. Hertag. He wrote a book, The Keys of Enoch, Book of Knowledge. And when he finished his 2-hour presentation, this guy at the back of the room got up, and he had American accent, and he said, "Look, I don't know if anybody's familiar, but with the Philadelphia experiment. But my name's Al Billick, and myself and my brother were involved in this project Rainbow." He said, if it's possible, if you could book this facility, I'd like to come tomorrow night and give you a talk and lay down on it. Well, hello. And we all turned up, plus a few more. He gave an interesting conversation about, the American naval ship Eldridge and how it disappeared, under interesting circumstances, and how he went from 1942 to 82 and ended up in Montauk Reservation in upstate New York.
Yep. Is he still alive?
No. Well, that's another thing. That's a bit like Schroeder's cat. He is alive now, but he is in a different time and space, isn't he, when you look at it? So he could be in the year 3000, because he did go up into the year 3000, and then he came back to the 2000 or 2600. You have a look at it, it's a really interesting conversation. But he did come back into our normal time frame where he passed away. Yep.
Because I remember there was a lot of talk about him earlier this century. It was the talk of the town everywhere.
Hey, we've got a gentleman, Donovan. I'm just going to put something up here because he's been very, he's got some really great things there. So when I was talking about Rex Gilroy, about the car that turned up.
Yep.
Oh, Southern Highlands. But he's also, this is really interesting, and it goes back to when we started, and he's changed the name of Canberra. I just finished a 9-hour bus shift here in Canberra, and today the radio on the bus was getting super interference. Every time I came near a tower, this is new, I felt extra exhausted tonight than usual, feeling like they were pushing frequencies out today.
I don't know. Like if you're near a tower, if you've got the ground current, it's going to do that to you. Absolutely. That's going to happen regardless. But the towers aren't putting out the frequencies over a large area to make people sick. A lot of people shoot me down for this, but as I said, when you go back and talk to the telcos, they're like, it's actually true. There is a phenomenon that does occur, and it doesn't occur all the time, but it has happened a few times in the last 6 months, where if you go onto the website called spaceweather.com, it shows the solar wind speed. And prior to March 2023, that meant a lot. That meant whether there was ground current worldwide or not. But after March 23, that didn't mean anything. Even in May last year, when we had the Aurora Australis and Borealis seen worldwide, there was no ground current from that. and the solar wind speed got up to close to 1,000 k's per second. I watch it every day and have been for many years, and I've never seen it get that high. Wow. But there is a thing that they talk about, which is proton count in the air. And I've noticed that when we get what I would call a high proton count, which might be, if I go to the website myself, if the high proton count might be, like it's expressed in protons per cubic centimetre. And if the proton count got to 10, 12, 30, 20, 30, things like that, you got a charge in the air, similar to what was happening from the solar winds, but that charge in the air would stop about 5 or 6 meters above the ground. It wouldn't actually come down to ground level. But that charge in the air, if you were up in that environment, would be what people would call frequency modulation, because it's charged and you need charge to cause disturbance. And that does have a big effect on people who are really, really sensitive. In some cases, I observed last year where you'd have ground current coming out of the ground from street lights, and that was met from the charge in the air from the high proton count would actually meet it, and there'd be no difference in the charge from 2 meters up to 2 meters and above 2 meters above that, which is interesting. Another thing that generates a huge amount of quite dangerous ground current, and I haven't spoken about this in the past, and within my operation, we've spoken about it from time to time, and various people said, write a blog about it or whatever, but you can't talk a lot about it, is these wind farms they're putting up everywhere. They create a ground current radiation that goes up to about 6 to 8 meters above the ground. And if you've got cattle or people living near those wind farms, so they'd have to be on the properties, they're being subjected to a huge amount of radiation charge from wind farms. And no one's ever looked at wind farms as far as a radiation issue. No one talks about that these days. But in the very, very beginning, when they first started putting them up, there was a lot of talk about energetic disturbance in people living on the properties with the wind farms. That all just died out completely. Or maybe the media decided to push it aside. Let's not talk about that. This is great for everyone, isn't it?
I'm hearing you. All right. I know that an hour ahead of us, so it's getting on a bit for you. So, Gerard, it's been fantastic. I'm sure Andrena would have loved to be here, and so she's doing her little pilgrimage over there in Ireland. So she'll pass on the news.
It's been good. Last time I think it was 21 or 20 when we did this, and things had only just started, and everyone was really excited. And we're going, how long is this going to take? And what's your premier doing compared to our premier? It was a really.
Let me have a look.
When was it?
Hang on a sec. Yeah. God, we didn't even talk about Faraday cages too. I forgot about that. Gerard. The 2nd of July, 2020.
Yeah, shit. Yep. I think the vax had just come out. I'm just reading this comment here. Sorry, it's interesting.
Yeah,
the vaccine, and where everyone was sort of like jumping up and down like ants. Like, what the hell's going on? And did you know this? And did you know that? And it was the gathering of information that just sort of started around there. Solar weather starting to affect people's consciousness. Solar, we had so much ramped up space with the last 6 months. Yeah, we have. Lots of apparitions are experiencing. Yeah, that's an interesting one. Yep. You see the solar cycle 25, because it's not causing geoelectric ground current, to me, that says that the whole idea behind, but the fact it's not generating ground current means that people aren't being adversely affected by the ground current, because the ground current was actually harmful radiation. And so the fact that we got, doesn't matter whether it's solar cycle 25, doesn't really mean, it's really irrelevant, because we don't have that coming from solar winds anymore. It means that people's consciousness can be expanding in a roundabout way, because there's the nervous system, the Chinese meridian system, their blood and everything isn't being dragged down energetically, and it's being allowed to function properly. Except we've got the boogeyman in the room, which started in 2020.
Gotcha.
Like I said, if you want to, as I said, if you want to call it a crazy conspiracy theory, they turned the streetlights on everywhere. Bullshit us in the beginning that was 5G, like it was like a psyop, tell everyone to get used to the idea that there's going to be antennas everywhere with the millimeter wave, and just get used to it. And if there's any radiation, well, it's going to be for a good cause, because you're going to get better speeds on your phone. So everyone had that implanted in their brain. They put up all these lights, they start radiating everyone. So if they got busted, it'd be like, oh yeah, there's an antenna in there, it's for 5G, but hang on, there's no 5G connection. And that's replacing the ground current that stopped happening after March 2023. It's just
I think anybody's got on the internet, and you had the old 56k speed modem, or even the ones 33 or whatever, and you take the whole weekend to download a movie. To the point that everybody come at Christmas time and sending texts to people around Australia or overseas. I mean, you had to use abbreviations and all that stuff, because you're getting charged per bloody letter or per word. So the fact that now, instead of going to Blockbuster Video, you can just go to Netflix and stream it down. People have got so used to the creature comforts of instant gratification, and you can have it now.
Yep, exactly. It's like someone said to me that people are reading less books these days. This person ran a spiritual bookshop, and they noticed a big decline in book sales. Well, okay, you can buy online books and you read it online and things like that. But he seemed to think, and I agree with him, people are getting, it's a common, everyone knows this, everyone's getting distracted with their technology. It's just one of those things. Even I get distracted, but I'm doing research. So that's what I tell my wife anyway. So
well played. All right, with that in note, it's been fantastic. I really appreciate it coming on, and thank you for sharing your knowledge. Pardon me?
Good to catch up with the MBS a few weeks ago. That was great.
Yeah. All right, and for people, there's a unit. Boom, boom. Fantastic. All right, love your work. Thank you very much.
Talk to you.